So today I'm joined by Dr. Kristin Cova, who is a National Director of a Field Medical Team. Kristin started out her career as a clinical pharmacist and eventually moved her way into industry as an MSL herself, has served in progressive roles of increasing responsibility over time, and now finds herself, as I mentioned, as a National Director. And so today she's going to be sharing some perspective with us as a frequent user of H1. I think you've been at several companies that have utilized H1 in the past, so you've gotten really familiar with this platform. How her teams leverage H1 to drive certain efficiencies in the field and make their teams stronger and better.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you having me. Happy to be here.
Great. I'd like to first start out by asking you, how you decided to make the transition from clinical pharmacy into industry, and you've had quite a career trajectory, starting out as an MSL and then coming forward here to this leadership role. Tell us a little bit about your background.
So as you said, I spent the first 13 years of my career as a clinical pharmacist, traditional pharmacy, retail pharmacy, moving into pharmacy benefit management. And I found my transition into the pharmaceutical industry by way of specialty pharmacy. We were having medical science liaisons visit us in the specialty pharmacy to do pipeline presentations and let us know sort of what was coming down the pipeline. And that was sort of my first entree or exposure into what an MSL is and what they do. And from there, I transitioned into the pharma industry and, as you said, have had increasing roles and responsibility and currently find myself managing a field medical liaison team.
I would love to hear a little bit from you about how you integrate digital tools like H1 into daily activities for your teams and the kinds of expectations that you set for your teams to leverage those tools and use them to enhance HCP engagement.
So I think first and foremost, it's important to set the expectation with an MSL team when they're doing field engagements that they should be pre-call planning. Mm-hmm. And H1 has the important capability and functionality to be integrated into your CRM, your customer relationship management platform. So by utilizing that feature, you have everything, MSLs have everything they need at their fingertips in order to pre-call plan. And by that, I mean profiling the expert ahead of a meeting. Mm-hmm. So really the ability to look into the activities that the expert has been involved in since your last meeting, or more importantly, if it's a first-time introductory meeting, you really can dive in there and get to know the interest that the expert has. You can see what conferences they've recently attended, what publications have recently been dropped or released, and really just allows you to be prepared, informed of their interest, and more able to have that robust discussion with that expert.
Do you feel, that's great perspective, do you feel that kind of preparation by pre-call planning, and whether it's that day or a week before, does that actually help enhance the credibility of your MSLs?
Absolutely. And I think more than that, it sets the precedent. I respect you. I came here. I'm interested genuinely in what you're interested in, what you're doing, the type of research that you're conducting. And it just allows them to really establish rapport and start that strong relationship. It's relationship building.
Do you think that kind of preparation distinguishes your well-prepared MSLs from the competition that's out there?
I do. I think it affords a much deeper, more meaningful conversation. And I think it could be the component that sets you apart from what your competitor's doing or coming in to discuss and what objectives they might have.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, when you think about the KOLs that are out there, everybody wants a piece of their time, right?
Absolutely.
So it'll be the MSLs that really distinguish themselves with preparation and with knowledge and really fantastic scientific exchange will be the ones that are invited back.
Agree completely.
What are some of the common challenges that your teams face when it comes to finding the right experts to engage with?
One common challenge, beyond just knowing who the right experts are knowing who is most influential in that database of expertise and who's willing to engage with you and with industry.
So when it comes to leveraging a platform like H1 to help with things like what you were just talking about, what are some of the features that you find your teams really gravitate towards and utilize the most?
Sure. I think it's leveraging the network capabilities that you have at your fingertips in H1. Mm-hmm. It's also keeping up with their current interest, the activities that they're involved in, their publications, their clinical trials, just knowing on a day-to-day basis and staying up to date in real time with what they've been doing.
I think that's so important because a KOL's expertise grows over time, right?
Sure.
And your body of work will evolve and it will change. And I think that that's a really key point to kind of stay up to date. And, you might have a KOL that you've been calling on for 10 years, but over time that expertise becomes much more nuanced and it becomes much more targeted based on their interests as they evolve.
Yes, absolutely.
So there are certainly no shortage of challenges that are out there. How does your team leverage a platform like H1 to overcome challenges like what you just described?
Yeah, it's an important challenge. And I think in this day and age, if you're not utilizing a mapping and profiling platform, you're missing a huge opportunity. And the amount of time that it saves an MSL doing desktop research when you can leverage a platform and get all of the information you need up to date proactively to you in a short amount of time, it's time saving.
Yeah, I can see where that would derive a significant benefit because it's more of a one-stop shop as opposed to having to go piecemeal and find the disparate pieces of information and put them together. If you had to ballpark it, how much time do you think that would save your MSLs planning for a week's worth of activities utilizing H1 versus sort of doing this the old school way?
Oh, it's multiple hours per week, easily.
Yeah, that's time is money, right?
Yes.
So that's time well spent.
The more information they can have at their fingertips allows them to better tailor and have more impactful conversations and discussions when they're in the field. They're in front of these physicians for a very short amount of time, and we want to make sure that their conversations are precise and aligning with the interest that the expert is wanting from them.
That makes total sense to me. I mean, when you're prepared, you always feel better. You're much more effective. And what you're telling me is that by utilizing H1, your teams have really just been able to be that much more effective in front of their clients.
Yes.
So adopting new technologies can always be challenging. How do you stay ahead of it and motivate your teams to go ahead and utilize these new digital technology and novel solutions that come forward and are available to them?
So I think first and foremost, it's important that you communicate the benefits of the platform, what the platform can do for them, and show them the various ways that the platform can make their jobs easier, how it benefits not just them individually, but also the company as a whole. Mm-hmm. And I think just being able to highlight how they can use it to make their conversations more precise and more impactful, show them how it works for them.
Is it important then to have a partner in this that is going to offer up ongoing training?
Yes, H1 has always been great with that. So the customer service managers at H1 are always available to do one-on-one trainings, ad hoc trainings. And I think the more exposure that you can get your MSLs to the platform, individualizing their territory problems and issues and solving for specific things on a regional basis really allows them to see the benefits of the platform for them on an individual basis.
It sounds like it makes it much more accessible to them when they have examples that are trained in areas that they're interested in or in geographies that they're interested in. It makes that training more accessible.
Absolutely.
So what are some of your favorite features of the H1 platform?
Tagging is probably the first one that comes to mind. The ability to feed H1 a list of experts and have them tagged as either a primary investigator, a past ad board attendee, a speaker from the speaker bureau, because as time passes, you may forget those things. And it's really important to keep aware of what that expert has done with your company in partnership, because it makes us look like we know we're talking to each other and we're coming as one voice, one company to that expert.
And I think what's also interesting about that feature too is that those tags tend to aggregate over time. So you may start out with a couple, but over time, as other people tag them, you start to be able to see the visibility that HCP has with the rest of your organization.
Yes.
So how important is the ease of use of the platform?
Very important. That's one of the key things that helps MSLs and field teams adopt a brand new platform. Change is hard. Learning new technology is hard. People are just naturally averse to learning something new. And I will say that H1's platform is probably one of the most user-friendly platforms that I've ever used. And I think it has helped us, if you can get into that interface and really just automatically know what to do or intuitively click on things and filter things that you think should work, and they do work, it makes you much more successful.
Right. You're much more likely to come back to it. If it isn't going to produce something that's useful and meaningful to you, I always say to my team that insights are great, but they're they're only helpful if our clients can use them to make decisions. So ease of use of the platform, I think, is incredibly important. So
definitely,
it's a great perspective. Thank you. So what kinds of successes have you and your teams realized from utilizing H1 when it comes to optimizing your engagement strategy with KOLs?
Yeah, I think for my team, there have been two big key areas of success. One is we touched upon the pre-call planning. So really being able to prep yourself before a meeting and know what you're going into as far as your experts' recent activities have been. And I think the second is probably the strategic geographic mapping. A quick example I can give you is when we gained a new asset and entered into a new specialty therapeutic area, we didn't know any of the experts or the who's who in that space. So mapping it strategically on a geographic level really helped us. And then once we were comfortable with that network and starting to form relationships, we looked further into it and strategized and decided that we were uncovering some educational needs. And we used the platform to map out an entire new segment of healthcare providers, allied healthcare professionals, and we were able to do targeted disease awareness campaigns and really raise awareness and education of the particular disease state that we were in. And that strategic decision allowed us to reallocate some of our resources and eventually show leadership the impact that we were having from an educational standpoint at the field level.
So I think when you worked on that project, you worked with the Strategic Insights team, which is kind of a unique team that H1 has. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, it was an excellent experience. I can give you a specific example. What we were looking for, we were in the women's health space, and we were using a procedural or diagnostic code for abdominal ultrasound. And when we got a list, we realized it was probably a little bit too long, too many experts, and we were trying to figure out how to drill down because after all, there are multiple types of ultrasounds, and we realized that the list and the data was a little bit noisy and contained obstetrical ultrasound in pregnancy. And so we discovered something. H1 taught us about knockout codes. So we were able to drill in and pull out the ultrasounds that were just diagnosing disease and did not have the OB-related diagnostic or procedural code associated with it.
So it sounds like the challenge you were having was like winnowing down your data set to the right people, which, as you had mentioned before, is one of the critical things that you're charging your team to leverage H1 for, is finding the right people. But even with that, there was some additional learning that came about by collaborating with the Strategic Insights team. That's excellent.
Yes, and it was a perfect example showing the MSLs how you can filter down through and really zero in and get the most precise list of experts that you're really needing.
Depending on the size of the organization that you work for, right? Your MSLs could be wearing a lot of different hats. And more we're hearing from MSL teams that are being pulled into the feasibility process to go ahead and help with clinical trial recruitment or help the feasibility team find where the right patients are. So depending on the size of your organization, the smaller you are, you might find that your MSL teams are really working on a lot of different things. Has your team ever made use of products like Trial Landscape?
We have, actually, and I can give you a specific example that was helpful. We were really struggling to find and identify sites and primary investigators who had access to certain equipment like a DEXA scan. And the filtering and the coding within the clinical trial landscape allowed us to really drill down in and try to identify those sites or eliminate, if you will, the sites that did not have that sort of on-campus capability or a local clinic somewhere nearby that's convenient for patients. And we were able to really get and drilled in and precise on what sites that we needed to identify.
I bet that saved a lot of time.
Absolutely.
You didn't have to go out to individually go and query those sites to find out which equipment they had.
Yes, and it identified and uncovered new sites that we hadn't thought about or hadn't approached yet. So it did save us a lot of time, and it was efficient.
You've given us so much to think about today. I'd like to close today by asking you to give us a little bit of a historical perspective, right? So the MSL role is evolving all of the time. And from the podium at whatever Congress you're hearing from people talk about how MSLs and the medical affairs discipline is really sort of showing up in industry as one of the strategic pillars. Can you talk a little bit about the evolution of what you've seen in the MSL world from the time that you started as an MSL to now leading teams? What's changed and what do you see on the horizon, and how are digital tools like H1 going to help prepare your teams for the future?
I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is being aligned to the strategy. we've really seen, and it's a good thing, a shift towards the MSLs being involved and much more aware of just the overarching strategy in medical affairs and how what they're doing on a field level tactically marries up into the strategy. And also, I think they're better equipped to see the impact that they're having on the strategy, how the insights that they're bringing in and the strong relationships and partnerships they're forging in the field are really helping to meet the strategy and influence the strategy for the better.
One last question, and just kind of throw it out there. I'd just like to hear your perspective on how your teams line up around the mission to serve patients. I know that sometimes in a field-based position, you can kind of feel like you're at the terminal end of the universe. You're far away from where that strategy is being built, and you're not necessarily right in front of the patient. But how do you keep MSLs motivated around the mission to serve patients?
Yeah, you're behind the scenes. It's very true. I think at the core of the MSL role, their remit is really to educate providers and make the providers feel comfortable that they're making the most informed clinical decision for patients. And I think that's the most important way that we touch patients, is getting the education out there and really influencing clinical practice in a better way, ensuring the appropriate and safe use of the products that we manufacture.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Kristin. Thank you for your time today, and thanks for sharing your insights with us. I can't wait to hear how H1 is able to help serve your teams going forward.
Me too. Thank you.